Welcome to Daily English Stories. Every story hides a world. Some inspire, some haunt, some stay forever.
Chapter 1. The Curious Boy from Albuquerque. Jeff Bezos' story begins in a small hospital in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on a warm January day in 1964. His mother, Jacqueline Gies, was just a teenager, bright, hopeful, and too young to imagine how hard life could be. His biological father, Ted Jorgensen, owned a bike shop and struggled to keep things together. The marriage didn't last long. Jacqueline soon found herself raising a baby boy alone, juggling school, work, and motherhood all at once. But she never gave up, because when she looked into her baby's curious eyes, she knew he was meant for something special. Life was not easy for the young mother and her son. There were nights when Jacqueline studied for school exams, while Jeff slept beside her in a borrowed crib. Yet, through every challenge, she taught him strength, kindness, and the power of curiosity. When she later met a kind Cuban immigrant named Miguel Mike Bezos, everything began to change. Mike adopted Jeff and gave him his name, Jeffrey Preston Bezos. From that moment, Jeff's new family became his foundation, full of love, support, and belief in education. Even as a little boy, Jeff was different. He wasn't just curious. He was obsessed with understanding how things worked. When other kids played with toys, Jeff would take his apart to see what was inside. Once, he dismantled his crib with a screwdriver because he wanted to sleep in a real bed. His mother laughed, but she also saw that her son's curiosity wasn't ordinary. It was relentless. As Jeff grew, his interests expanded. He loved reading, especially books about science and invention. He would spend hours buried in encyclopedias, fascinated by space, energy, and technology. He was captivated by the idea of human exploration, of one day going beyond the Earth. His room was filled with gadgets, wires, and makeshift experiments. There was always a spark in his eyes, the spark of a dreamer who saw possibilities where others saw limits. Every summer, Jeff spent time at his grandfather's ranch in Texas. His grandfather, Lawrence Preston Gies, worked for the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, a man of quiet wisdom and boundless skill. On the ranch, Jeff learned lessons no school could teach: how to fix engines, mend fences, and solve problems with patience and creativity. When something broke, his grandfather never threw it away. He'd say, "Jeff, we can figure it out." Those words stayed with him for life. The ranch became Jeff's playground of imagination. He learned the value of hard work, long days under the sun, feeding animals, repairing windmills, and learning to think independently. It was there he discovered one of his most important qualities: persistence. Whether he was fixing a broken machine or designing a homemade alarm system to keep his siblings out of his room, Jeff never gave up until he made things work. Back at school, Jeff stood out as a brilliant but quiet student. Teachers admired his focus and curiosity, but his classmates often found him intense. He was the kind of boy who always asked why, not once, but until the answer made sense. He loved science fairs and built projects that amazed everyone, from solar cookers to early computer circuits. When he gave speeches, he didn't talk about ordinary goals. He talked about changing the future. But his path wasn't free of challenges. When his friends were out playing, Jeff was often working on projects that failed. Circuits didn't connect, experiments blew up, and many ideas didn't work the first, second, or even third time. Yet, each failure taught him something new. He began to understand that mistakes weren't setbacks. They were steps toward discovery. By high school, Jeff had developed a love for computers. He spent countless hours in the lab, teaching himself programming, fascinated by what software could do. He even started a small business with his girlfriend, the Dream Institute, an educational camp for young students interested in science. It was his first taste of entrepreneurship, and even though it was small, it showed his natural ability to organize, lead, and inspire. Still, behind his growing intelligence and ambition, Jeff remained humble. He admired his parents deeply and often said that his success began with their belief in him. They didn't just encourage his dreams, they built the world that allowed those dreams to grow. When he told them he wanted to go to Princeton University, one of the world's most challenging schools, they didn't hesitate. They simply said, "If that's your dream, go chase it." As he prepared to leave home for college, Jeff looked back at his journey, from the small house in Albuquerque to the wide fields of his grandfather's ranch, from broken toys to self-made science projects. He knew one thing for certain: his curiosity had no limits. It had carried him through his childhood, shaping his mind and his spirit. And now, it was about to take him to the next chapter of his life. At Princeton, he would meet brilliant minds, explore the frontiers of computer science, and discover ideas that would one day transform the world. But long before Amazon, before billions of dollars and rockets to space, there was just a boy who loved to take things apart and dream of putting the universe back together in a better way. Jeff Bezos' journey was never about where he came from, but about where his imagination could take him. And it all began with a curious child, a loving family, and an unshakable belief that one small idea can change everything. Chapter 2: Dreams in Motion. When Jeff Bezos arrived at Princeton University, he was no longer the boy taking apart radios in his grandfather's workshop. He was a young man with a mind full of questions and a heart full of ambition. Princeton, in the 1980s, was a place of sharp intellect and relentless competition. But Jeff was ready. He dove headfirst into computer science and electrical engineering, fascinated by how logic and creativity could blend to build something entirely new. While most students aimed for safe careers, Jeff was chasing possibilities. His professors noticed his focus, his ability to stay at his desk long after the others had left, eyes fixed on the screen, fingers racing across the keyboard. He wasn't just learning to code, he was learning to think like a builder. His classmates saw him as intense, sometimes too serious. But behind that seriousness was a dream taking shape. He graduated with honors, ready to conquer the professional world. His first job took him to Wall Street, where computers were changing the face of finance. The fast-paced world of numbers and predictions suited his analytical mind. He worked for several firms, including Fittel, Bankers Trust, and eventually D.E. Shaw, one of the most innovative hedge funds in New York. By the time he was in his late 20s, Jeff had everything people usually chase: success, money, and respect. But something was missing. Every morning, he would walk through the busy streets of Manhattan, coffee in hand, surrounded by skyscrapers, yet his thoughts drifted elsewhere. He wasn't driven by wealth. He was driven by curiosity. One evening in 1994, while scrolling through early reports on the new phenomenon called the Internet, Jeff stumbled upon a statistic. Internet usage is growing by 2,300% per year. That number stopped him cold. It wasn't just data, it was destiny calling. Jeff couldn't shake the thought. What could such explosive growth mean for the future? What could it create? As he pondered, an idea began to form. An online bookstore. Simple, yet limitless. A place where anyone, anywhere, could buy any book ever printed. But pursuing that idea meant leaving everything behind. His stable job, his comfortable life, his predictable path. Still, deep inside, he knew he couldn't ignore this feeling. Later, he said, "I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret it. But I knew the one thing I might regret is not trying." With that conviction, he made a decision that would change history. Jeff told his boss at D.E. Shaw, a man he deeply admired, about his plan to start a company on the internet. His boss listened carefully, then said, "That sounds like a great idea, Jeff, for someone who doesn't already have a good job." But Jeff had already made up his mind. He went home, sat down with his wife Mackenzie, and told her about his dream. It was risky. They had savings, but not much. The internet was new, uncertain, unproven. Yet Mackenzie believed in him completely. Together, they packed their car, left New York City, and drove across the country to Seattle. During the long drive, Jeff wrote down his business plan on a laptop, balancing it on his knees while the car moved along the endless highway. When they arrived, they found a small house with a garage that would become the birthplace of Amazon. There was no fancy office, no team of experts, no guarantee of success. Just a few desks made of wooden doors, a couple of computers, and two dreamers who refused to quit. Jeff wanted to name the company Cadabra, as in abracadabra, but someone misheard it as cadaver. So he went back to his list of ideas and chose Amazon, the name of the world's largest river. It symbolized exactly what he envisioned, something vast, unstoppable, and full of life. Day and night, Jeff and his small team worked tirelessly. They packed books themselves, labeled boxes, answered customer emails, and handled every order manually. In the beginning, sales were small, just a few books a day. But when Jeff heard the sound of his first online sale, he jumped from his chair with excitement. To him, that tiny ding was not just a sale. It was proof that his dream could work. The early days were brutal. The website crashed, shipments were delayed, and money ran short. Friends and family questioned his decision. "Why give up everything for this internet thing?" they asked. But Jeff didn't waver. He believed in his mission to build the most customer-focused company on earth. Slowly, Amazon began to grow. Orders started pouring in from all over the country, then from around the world. Jeff reinvested every dollar back into the company, expanding its reach from books to music, then to everything people could imagine. His guiding principle was simple. It's always day one. Every day was a new beginning, a chance to improve, innovate, and grow. What made Jeff different was his mindset. He wasn't chasing quick profit. He was building for the long term. He once said, "We're willing to be misunderstood for long periods of time." Critics laughed at his slow profits and wild ambitions, but he didn't care. He could see the horizon others couldn't. Each challenge only made him stronger. When investors doubted him, he smiled. When competitors tried to copy him, he moved faster. When the dot-com bubble burst and dozens of internet companies vanished, Amazon survived, bruised but alive. Jeff's resilience came not from luck, but from his belief that persistence and patience were more powerful than fear. By the end of the decade, Amazon was no longer just a bookstore. It was becoming a revolution. Millions of people were shopping online, something that once seemed impossible. Jeff Bezos, the man who left a high-paying job to follow a crazy idea, had changed how the world bought and sold forever. Yet, even with growing fame and wealth, Jeff stayed grounded. He still worked long hours, still obsessed over customer experience, still pushed his team to think bigger. Because for him, success wasn't a finish line. It was a journey of constant reinvention. And as he looked out of his Seattle office one quiet evening, the same curiosity that once filled the boy from Albuquerque returned. If an online bookstore could change the world, what else could human imagination achieve? That thought, that spark, was only the beginning of his next dream, one that would take humanity beyond the skies. Chapter 3. Building the Giant. The sound of rain tapping against the small garage roof was familiar to Jeff Bezos. It was where he and his small team worked tirelessly, surrounded by stacks of books, tangled wires, and the hum of old computers. There were no luxury offices, no expensive equipment, just determination and a dream. Amazon had begun, but the real challenge was only starting. The early days were a blur of long hours and sleepless nights. Orders trickled in slowly at first, just a few books a day. Jeff would pack them himself, print the labels, and drive to the post office to ship them. He would smile as he handed over each package, imagining the person on the other end, someone who had trusted his small, unknown website. To Jeff, that trust was everything. But behind the smile was exhaustion. The servers crashed often, suppliers failed to deliver, and sometimes money ran dangerously low. Investors were skeptical. Online shopping? They laughed. Who would buy books on the internet? Yet Jeff refused to give up. He had one rule that guided him through the chaos. Focus on the customer, not the competitor. As the months turned into years, Amazon began to grow. Word spread like wildfire. Customers loved the simplicity, the speed, and the idea of ordering anything from the comfort of home. Every review, every email from a happy customer fueled Jeff's motivation. He expanded from books to music, electronics, and beyond. But success came with storms. The late 1990s brought the dot-com boom, a wave of internet companies that rose and fell overnight. When the crash came, many businesses vanished. Amazon's stock price dropped sharply. Critics called it doomed, and newspapers predicted its end. Jeff stood in front of his team one morning, holding a newspaper that declared, "Amazon bomb." He smiled and said, "Don't worry about the stock price. Worry about the customer experience. If we stay true to that, everything else will follow." Those words became Amazon's heartbeat. Jeff's relentless innovation pushed the company forward. He introduced features no one had ever imagined. One-click ordering, where customers could buy in seconds. Customer reviews, giving shoppers a voice. And later, Amazon Prime, offering fast shipping that changed the way people thought about convenience. Each new idea came with risk, but also with courage. He often said, "If you never want to be criticized, then don't do anything new." And Jeff did plenty that was new. His team sometimes thought his ideas were impossible. He wanted warehouses that could deliver across the world, drones that could drop packages at your doorstep, and even plans to explore space through Blue Origin, his private space company. "We have to think long-term," he would remind them. "The best businesses are built not for years, but for generations." As Amazon's influence grew, so did Jeff's reputation. The man who once packed books in a garage now led one of the largest companies in the world. He became known for his clear vision, discipline, and an almost childlike curiosity that never faded. Yet, through all the fame, he remained grounded. He reminded everyone that Amazon was still day one, a company always learning, always improving, and never satisfied. Still, success was not without sacrifice. The long hours, the constant pressure, and the weight of leadership tested him. But Jeff believed every struggle was part of building something meaningful. "Hard work," he said, "is the price of making history." And indeed, Amazon was making history, redefining how the world shops, works, and connects. By the 2000s, Amazon had grown far beyond an online bookstore. It became a marketplace for millions of sellers, a cloud computing leader through Amazon Web Services, and a technological giant shaping the modern economy. The company's reach extended into entertainment, smart devices, and global logistics. Yet Jeff's focus never shifted. Customer obsession remained the foundation of everything. When asked what drove him, Jeff often shared a story from his childhood, fixing broken machines with his grandfather on the ranch. "He taught me that if you care enough, you can always find a way to make things better," Jeff said. That lesson guided every innovation Amazon made. Years later, standing before a crowd of employees, Jeff reflected on his journey. He spoke not about money or fame, but about courage. The courage to take a leap into the unknown. "I knew I might fail," he said, "but I also knew I would regret not trying more than failing." That single belief, the power of trying, became his true legacy. Today, Amazon stands as one of the most influential companies on Earth. From a garage to global dominance, it represents more than success. It represents persistence, creativity, and the belief that great things begin with small steps. And behind it all stands Jeff Bezos, a curious boy from Albuquerque who turned his dream into a revolution. His story reminds us that innovation doesn't start with perfection. It starts with passion and the courage to build, even when no one believes you can. Chapter 4. Thinking Beyond Earth. Long before Jeff Bezos became one of the richest men on Earth, he used to lie on the flat roof of his grandfather's ranch in Texas and stare up at the night sky. The stars fascinated him. Silent, infinite, unreachable. Even as a child, he wondered what lay beyond them. Decades later, that same boy, now a man who had changed the way people shop, would set his eyes back on the heavens. Amazon had conquered the business world. It was no longer just a company. It was a symbol of innovation, efficiency, and ambition. But Jeff's mind was restless. For him, success was never a finish line. It was a launch pad. He began asking a question few billionaires dare to ask: what comes after Earth? His answer took shape in the form of Blue Origin, a private space company he quietly founded in 2000, even before Amazon became a global empire. Its motto was simple yet powerful: Gradatim ferocita, Latin for step by step ferociously. It captured Jeff's entire life philosophy. Take small steps every day, but take them with purpose and courage. In the early years, Blue Origin worked in near secrecy. There were no flashy announcements, no grand promises, just a small team of engineers in the desert, testing rockets that often failed before they flew. Each failure, however, brought progress. Jeff wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing the dream of a future where millions of people could live and work in space. When reporters asked why he was investing billions in rockets, Jeff smiled and said, "We need to protect Earth by moving heavy industries into space. Earth should be a residential zone, clean and green." To him, space wasn't about escaping Earth. It was about saving it. By the 2010s, Blue Origin began to make headlines. The New Shepard rocket successfully launched, reached the edge of space, and safely returned to land, an achievement that made reusable space travel real. When Jeff himself flew aboard New Shepard in 2021, it was more than just a milestone. It was a promise kept to the boy who once looked up at the stars. He described the view of Earth as fragile and beautiful, and the experience reminded him how precious home truly is. That same realization deepened his concern for the planet's future. Climate change, deforestation, and pollution, all consequences of humanity's progress, began to weigh heavily on him. With the same passion that built Amazon and Blue Origin, he launched the Bezos Earth Fund in 2020, pledging $10 billion to fight climate change. "We can save this planet," he said, "but it will take collective effort, bold innovation, and time." The good news is, we still have time if we act now. Through the Earth Fund, he supported reforestation, clean energy, and ocean preservation projects across the globe. His goal wasn't charity, it was continuity, ensuring that future generations could still call Earth their home. Even after stepping down as Amazon's CEO in 2021, Jeff didn't slow down. He began focusing more on the big picture, humanity's long-term survival. While others measured success in years, Jeff measured it in centuries. "I want my great-grandchildren to look up at the sky and see a thriving civilization, not a fading one," he said. He began to merge his two worlds, technology and sustainability. Amazon invested heavily in renewable energy, electric delivery vehicles, and carbon neutrality projects. Warehouses that once symbolized commerce now symbolized change. The company pledged to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement. For Jeff, innovation was no longer just about making life easier. It was about making life possible. His philosophy, "It's always day one," became the driving force behind all of it. To Jeff, day one meant living with the spirit of a startup, curious, humble, and hungry to improve. Day two, he warned, is stasis, followed by irrelevance, followed by decline. This mindset kept him and his teams grounded, no matter how large their achievements grew. Despite his enormous wealth, Jeff often spoke about the power of beginnings, the courage to start something when the outcome is uncertain. He believed humanity was still at its day one moment in exploring space, curing disease, and building a sustainable planet. "We are the first generation with the tools to build a future beyond limits," he said. "Let's not waste it." Critics questioned his ambitions, some calling them unrealistic. But Jeff had heard that before, when he started selling books online from a garage. Every impossible idea, he believed, was simply an untested one. As Blue Origin continued to develop its New Glenn rockets and plans for space habitats, Jeff's focus expanded further. He envisioned colonies orbiting Earth, vast structures where people could live in harmony with technology and nature. These were not fantasies to him, but blueprints for survival. We can build a future where growth doesn't come at Earth's expense, he told an audience. It's time to move humanity forward, beyond boundaries, beyond gravity, beyond imagination. And yet, even with his gaze set on the stars, Jeff never forgot where he began. He often visited schools and startups, encouraging young dreamers to take risks, to innovate, and to never let fear decide their future. He reminded them that progress doesn't start with money or fame. It starts with curiosity, persistence, and the courage to act. Today, Jeff Bezos stands as more than a businessman. He's a visionary who redefined commerce, technology, and even the idea of possibility itself. His story isn't just about Amazon's rise or rockets in the sky. It's about the relentless human desire to build, to explore, and to leave something meaningful behind. From the quiet ranches of Texas to the silent darkness of space, his journey comes full circle, a testament that dreams have no limits, and neither does humanity's potential. As Jeff once said, standing beneath a launch tower, watching the rocket that bore his dream rise into the sky, we are meant to go. We are meant to explore. And the only way to predict the future is to build it. Chapter 5. The Legacy of a Visionary. When Jeff Bezos announced in 2021 that he would step down as CEO of Amazon, the world paused for a moment. For nearly 3 decades, he had been the face of a revolution that changed how people lived, shopped, and even thought about business. But to Jeff, it wasn't an ending. It was simply another beginning. After all, as he often said, it's still day one. Behind the image of a sharp-driven entrepreneur was a man who had built his life on discipline, curiosity, and resilience. Yet, beyond the boardrooms and rocket launches, Jeff's story also had a deeply personal side, one filled with love, challenges, heartbreak, and growth. Jeff's marriage to Mackenzie Scott had been a partnership that began long before Amazon was known to the world. She had believed in his dream when it was just an idea scribbled in a notebook. Together, they packed their car, drove to Seattle, and turned their garage into the birthplace of what would become one of the largest companies in history. She handled the first accounts, helped name the company, and stood beside him through sleepless nights and endless uncertainty. But even in extraordinary lives, not everything goes according to plan. In 2019, Jeff and Mackenzie announced their divorce after 25 years of marriage. It was a moment that shocked the world, not because of the split itself, but because of how gracefully they handled it. There were no accusations, no bitterness, no public fights. Instead, there was gratitude. Jeff thanked Mackenzie for her partnership and friendship, while she praised him for his vision and kindness. Their separation became a lesson in respect and maturity, showing that endings can be handled with dignity. Mackenzie went on to become one of the world's most generous philanthropists, giving away billions to support education, equality, and human rights, a reflection of the shared values they had once built together. Meanwhile, Jeff continued to evolve. With his new partner, Lawrence Sanchez, he began to balance his life differently, focusing not just on business, but also on purpose, connection, and reflection. He often spoke about the importance of relationships, saying, "You can have a job and you can have a career, but what truly matters is having a calling." Even after stepping down as CEO, Jeff's influence within Amazon remained profound. He stayed as executive chairman, guiding major innovations in artificial intelligence, logistics, and sustainability. Under his philosophy of customer obsession, Amazon continued to grow, serving billions of people across the globe. Yet Jeff's attention shifted to the bigger picture, the well-being of humanity and the preservation of our planet. Blue Origin continued its pursuit of accessible space travel, inviting not just astronauts but ordinary citizens to experience what he called the overview effect, the life-changing view of Earth from space. Each successful flight reminded Jeff that his mission wasn't just about rockets, it was about perspective. "When you see the Earth from up there," he said, "you realize how small our problems are and how connected we truly are." Beyond technology, Jeff's impact stretched into philanthropy. He pledged billions to the Bezos Earth Fund, aimed at fighting climate change and protecting biodiversity. He also launched initiatives to support education and homelessness through the Bezos Day One Fund, which focused on helping families and building preschools in underserved communities. For Jeff, wealth was never the goal. It was a tool to create change. "It's not about how much you have," he once said, "but about what you do with what you have." These words defined his legacy. Despite his fortune, Jeff lived with surprising simplicity. He was known to do his own dishes at home, eat breakfast with his kids, and make time for his mother and stepfather. The same man who had adopted him decades ago and given him his name. Mike Bezos remained one of his greatest inspirations. Jeff often credited him for teaching patience, humility, and the value of hard work. "He gave me the gift of unconditional love," Jeff said, "and that gave me the courage to take risks." That courage became the heart of Jeff's legacy. From the quiet boy who loved taking apart gadgets to the man who built an empire and then reached for the stars, his story carried one message. You don't need to be born into greatness to achieve it. You just need the courage to start. Jeff often reminded young entrepreneurs that failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. "If you're not failing," he said, "you're not experimenting enough." To him, the greatest risk was never taking one. In his later years, Jeff began focusing on storytelling, sharing the lessons he had learned from his journey. He spoke about persistence, innovation, and the power of long-term thinking. "Most people overestimate what they can do in a year," he said, "and underestimate what they can do in 10. It was this long view that had turned Amazon, once a small online bookstore, into a company that shaped the modern world. But his legacy went beyond technology and business. It was about imagination, the belief that humanity could always build something better, that progress never stops. Jeff wanted his story to inspire others, not to copy his path, but to find their own. He often looked back on the words he wrote in his first Amazon shareholder letter. "We will continue to make bold rather than timid investment decisions. We will continue to learn from our failures." That letter, written in 1997, still guided Amazon decades later. It symbolized everything he stood for: innovation, resilience, and belief in the impossible. And so, as Jeff looked toward the horizon, whether it was Earth's forests or the edges of outer space, he carried the same thought that began his journey. The best way to predict the future is to build it yourself. In the end, The story of Jeff Bezos is not just about one man's rise to power. It's about the power of curiosity, the courage to dream, and the humility to learn. It reminds us that true success is not measured by how much money you earn, but by how many lives you touch, how many problems you solve, and how bravely you keep moving forward, even when the path is uncertain. As the rockets rise, the cities hum with technology, and the world continues to evolve, one truth remains timeless. Anyone, anywhere, can build something extraordinary. All it takes is one idea, one spark, and the courage to start today and never stop believing.